Hawley Senior Living, an alternative to nursing home care that provides support for daily living. Online at hawleyseniorliving.com.
Rural Enrichment and Community Headquarters Incorporated, better known as REACH, is a nonprofit human service center. Centrally located in Hawley, Minnesota, its mission is to improve the quality of life for rural residents. Welcome to the Hawley Area Community Show. I'm your host, Jody, and I'm here with a woman by the name of Daria Odegaard from the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center, and we're at REACH. And the reason we're talking, number one, is so you can tell folks a little bit about what you do at the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center, but also we're going to talk a little bit more about domestic violence now that children are in the home. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, REACH and Rape and Abuse Crisis Center, we've had a relationship for quite a few years.
Absolutely.
Tell us about your counselor that comes here and how often.
Well, she's just a terrific woman, and I believe she's here weekly on Wednesdays, and she provides services. REACH is one of our outreach sites, and so an outreach site means that we send counselors. We're located in the Fargo-Moorhead area, and we send counselors then to various locations, kind of like spiderweb almost. We send counselors out to various locations to provide our services to individuals who maybe don't live within the Fargo-Moorhead area but still live within our service area. So our counselor who comes here to REACH provides those services to individuals who live here within the Hawley area. Hawley is within our service area.
Yeah, and I know that she's typically busy because we do know that abuse happens everywhere. Now, but you are not a counselor. What's your position?
I'm the education coordinator at the agency. So I'm responsible for coordinating and scheduling all of our educational endeavors on behalf of the agency. There are 3 of us educators on staff, and we spend a lot of time throughout the year speaking in public schools about domestic violence, sexual assault, child sexual abuse. We do a lot within the community with those topics as well. We do a lot with evaluating and writing and creating in different forms of curriculum and things like that as well, just to make sure that people are aware of the issues. And we do a lot in terms of prevention with the issues too.
I know that you've been really expanding into some different topics that are very timely. What are some of those things that you've been doing in outreach?
Well, bullying certainly is kind of a hot topic right now, so we've been doing a lot in that realm, educating students on that issue. But one of the things that we're most excited about, we received some funding last summer from the Verizon Foundation, which enabled us to really take a look at issues of dating violence from a new perspective. We're able to write a curriculum about dating violence and look at the use of technology in teenage relationships and how technology is being used to further perpetrate violent behavior in terms of sexting, stalking, and things like that. And so that new curriculum is just about ready to be rolled out. We're doing some focus groups with it next week, actually, and we're looking to implement that curriculum in the Fargo-Moorhead area within the next year for 8th grade students.
Oh, and it's so timely, like I said. So I think we're going to take a little break and talk more specifically about domestic violence in the homes and how this affects children. So we'll be right back.
Real Country plays today's stars and legends. Toby Keith, George Strait, the next generation of legends. Alabama, the Charlie Daniels Band. Once a legend, always a legend. Patsy Cline,
Crazy
Conway Twitty.
Hello, darling.
Today's stars and legends are on Real Country.
Real Country 102.3.
Located in Hawley, Minnesota, its mission is to improve the quality of life for rural residents of West Becker, Clay, and Norman counties by bringing important services to the people. In addition to its counseling agency, REACH sponsors the Dress for Success program, the Hawley Food Pantry, and REACH Reusables Thrift Store. REACH, small communities, big hearts. And we're back with Daria Odegaard from the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center. As we spoke before, there's a rape and abuse counselor that comes to the REACH office once a week. And those are for folks that can just access the Hawley location more easily than it's in a Fargo location?
Correct.
I understand. So let's talk about domestic violence. First of all, what is domestic violence?
Well, domestic violence is basically the use of abusive behaviors by one person in a relationship to control the other individual in that relationship. And when I say relationship, the partners in that relationship may be married or not. The relationship can be a heterosexual relationship, it may be a gay or lesbian relationship. The individuals can be cohabitating, they may be separated, or they can be dating. But basically, the abuse which occurs within that relationship can be physical abuse, it can be verbal, emotional, sexual, or even economic abuse.
Well, so how common is domestic violence?
You know, the unfortunate reality is that domestic violence is incredibly common. In the United States, domestic violence is known as the nation's best kept secret, and it's estimated that domestic violence occurs in approximately 50% of all homes.
Oh my goodness.
In the U.S. We just don't talk about it. It's that secret. You know, nobody wants to talk about what happens behind their closed doors. We also know that domestic violence is the #1 cause of injury to American women who are between the ages of 15 and 44. It's the #1 reason why American women visit the emergency room every year. And furthermore, 1 in 4 American women will experience domestic violence during her lifetime. It's a huge problem. But those are national statistics. I pulled some of our numbers locally for the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center. And in the previous year, in 2010, we provided services to 1,990 victims of domestic violence, and 27% of those individuals came from rural Clay County. So it's a huge problem.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you brought those local statistics, because I think that does surprise a lot of people. So let's talk about when domestic violence is happening in the home, how does it affect the children?
You know, a lot of times parents think that if children are sleeping when an incident occurs, or they're not in the room, that they're not affected. And we used to refer to children who live in homes with domestic violence as children who witness domestic violence. We've changed that verbiage. We now refer to those children as children who experience domestic violence. Because even if a child isn't directly harmed, they're not directly called a name, they're not directly hit, they certainly are experiencing all the tension, all the extra stuff that comes along with the violence itself, and they're definitely affected. We know that children who experience domestic violence are often very lonely and they feel isolated. They often resort to violence themselves to solve issues. It's a learned behavior, so they learn that violence must be a way to solve problems. They have difficulty developing close relationships. They become very afraid often of those close relationships. They have difficulty trusting adults very often. They become very overachieving, thinking that if they just do so much better at something, or they work so much harder, then they can fix the violence and divert attention. Often they will experience developmental delays or regress in behavior. They feel powerless because they want to stop the abuse and they can't. They're angry at the victimized parent because they want that parent to stop the abuse. They're angry at the abusive parent because they want them to stop the abuse. And it's just a lot of turmoil that they're experiencing.
Yeah, and I think the misperception is some people think if you have an overachiever, then this home must be a very healthy home.
Exactly.
And so that would be surprising to some. And lastly, what are some of the causes of domestic violence?
You know, that's a really complicated question. I want to make sure that everybody understands that alcohol and drugs do not cause domestic violence. I think that's one thing we jump to really quick. They are not a cause for domestic violence. Neither is just sheer anger or I had a bad day. Domestic violence is a learned behavior, and it really dates back to a lot of history, how there's been a disparity in power between men and women over the course of history. So it's a difference in gender roles, and it's a difference in the learned experiences that individuals have had.
Thank you so much for enlightening us about this important topic. And so if someone needs additional information or needs help, we'll put those numbers on our screen. You can either call the REACH office or the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center. Thank you so much, Daria.
Absolutely.
And we're going to have you back because there's lots to talk about.
You bet. My pleasure. Thank you.
You bet. Until next time.